hope I'll be able to finish in the next 30 to 1 hour. Okay, so what we'll be doing is a monolithic application. A monolithic application is where you have so many things working together within one giant folder, kind of, and that's what we'll have here. I'll be trying to, I'll see as much as possible that I can break down. There's quite a lot of what it entails, but I will try as much as possible to break it down. I will explain everything one after the other. Hopefully, yes, let's try to. Now, I did mention that a monolithic application or architecture is where you have one single setup or one single folder, and that folder has like everything that is going with it, going on with it. I've used several technologies to make this happen, and I will not be writing out, I'll just be talking to it, and hopefully you'll be getting the scope or the idea of what I'm doing. Okay, so it's Office Lime Edge, and the technology I use is very important. I'm using Golang, GoRM, I'm using Vite, React, TypeScript, Tailwind, and I'm going to be using Expo. I've not set up this one. I'm going to be using Expo. So what's my folder structure? My folder structure is everything, like I said, everything is one single stuff, you know, going on. First of all, we have our backend, which is a folder. It's going to be a Go project. It's going to have all these stuffs in it. Code for migration is going to be there. Our PKG, more like public libraries and what have you. Public libraries means that other libraries can interact with it. That's what public libraries means. So every other thing, nobody can interact with this one. That's what you do here when you say internal. You don't want any other person from outside to interact with this. But when you say PKG, maybe you want to create a module where other people will be able to interact with it. So any code you put here, you are indirectly saying that it's okay for people to interact with it. Now the web part is the React web application, where your React application. So we do know the public. This one is a given. The public folder src is where all our things are. There's going to be several things that are going to be here. So several things are going to be in that location that I just highlighted. We have layout types. So most of them are actually blank for now, because of course we are still putting everything together. So, and the idea is that over time, the whole thing is going to, you know, come up together. So what's the next thing that we have? Then you have your mobile app. And this is going to be where you have your Expo. This part has not been set up. And at the end, you now have shared libraries or packages. This shared library is supposed to be a way for you to kind of be able to, you know, interact with other packages where you have similar things. There will be a point whereby there will be similar activities. So this will allow you to be able to do that. Okay, so what next? Let's see. Now for this kind of package, you need a tool to manage them, and the tool I'm using is PMP. PMP is a package manager for a package manager. That's the only way I can explain it. Package manager for a package manager. And what that does is that it allows you to create a kind of a way to be able to share some components you've written in other part of the projects. So if I've written something here, I can make use of it here and make use of it here. instead of me using folder base. If you noticed in my code, I've been using things like this. If you notice, I use things like this to access where I want to go to. One of the benefits of doing something like this is that imagine you change the location of this file and it's now in a inner page. What happens? This does not need to change. This is saying the roots of where I belong to. Find that. That is one of the things you are gonna get with this. You're gonna see down the line what I talk about it. So this is your pnpm lock, just like your package JSON lock. It also has its own package stuff. Now this package stuff is a way for the entire React, or rather entire Node.js project, because there are, well, for now there's just only two Node.js projects. There's the shared and there's the web, right? And the mobile thing is still a thing. I've not started working on it yet, so we won't be talking about it. So this package is the one that is sitting in the root directory, and there's a lot of things we are doing here. We are specifying workspace. Workspace is like, oh, the tools that I need to make things work. So in this tool, I need these guys and I need these guys. I'm going to be focusing on few things. Yeah, I won't talk about everything. The ones I'm going to be talking about are the ones that are important, that I think you guys need to be familiar with. Now the first one is I won't talk about these guys. The first one is the Open API TypeScript, and then Open API TypeScript code gen. What this does is that it generates code for me from the Open API that would have been generated from Swagger. So these guys, all of them work together. This is another thing entirely. I just did this one today, so this is new. This concurrently allow me to run two terminal in the same command prompt. So by now you would have discovered that I will first run maybe Golang by writing a, then I would then go and run, what else do I run? Npm run dev. You've noticed they will be running two different places. Now this concurrently allow me to run two things on the same timeline. I don't need to be switching between terminals. That is what that concurrently is all about, and you see me use it. If you see me use it. Now I have this guy called makefile. What is the big fuss about this guy? Now this makefile allows me to automate some things, because hey, we're having several projects here and I want to be able to start some things, stop some things, and do some code generation and whatever. We'll still talk about the code gen later. So this makefile allows me to be able to run, like Swagger initialization that we normally have to type. Allows me to do that, allows me to do code generation, allows me to do what other thing, run the backend, allow me to run both at the same time. So if I say run web, for example, it's gonna go into the web folder and then do pmp dev. That's what it does. If I say it should run dev and the backend, this is what I'm talking about now. This one require concurrently that I installed of recent to run two or more terminal applications. So it's running web and it's running a. So this is it here. It run a and it run this. So by the time I have Expo, I'll be able to also run Expo like that. So the idea is that everything is working in one single folder. And one of the major benefits of having something like this is because you are just starting up. You don't want, when you want to quickly pull up something, start opening you want to go ahead and open the folder, open another Visual Studio Code and things like that. Start pushing. If you are doing anything here, anything you push now goes to what you need to do. You can literally, your code is literally faster in this form. Okay, let's go our way. So we're going up and down, up and down. So let's start with the backend. Backend is always sweet. Now, there are a lot of things that you are already aware of, which from the explanation I've been doing from Go all this while, there will be some things that I'm sure that it's like now becoming a norm. It's becoming a ritual that you already know. Oh, you already know what that thing is. Now, there are some things I want you to pay attention to, which I have over time, it has now become what it is because of the automation that I want to deploy. I'm going to be using environment variable, obviously. There's a lot of things I've also defined, which are not you are familiar with already. You're familiar with all these things. I will talk about things that are new in the system. Okay, so one of the things that is new is this one here, which is the host. Now this host is important, even though we've been using environment variable. I've also added a new thing here, which is the host. This host is important in my code generation. The code generation required this to know the API to call or the endpoints to call. You're going to see that shortly. Okay, so this is our configuration initialization. We pull this one, pull a lot of things, it set up database, and then pull some information into the configuration variable to be able to use elsewhere in the system. Okay, this is our cross and making sure everything is running. Now, this is us creating a bunch of services. A lot of things I will not explain for now. Okay, but the idea of having something like this is such that it can be easy for us to test and know where things are breaking. And there's still going to be more layer to this later on. But for now, this is the layer we have. And to explain this, I will break it down by showing you something here. Just to explain this one a bit. We're going to be having API. The API is like a controller. Then we are going to be having the model. The model is what maps to the table. Then you're going to be having the service. The service is what does the work. So look at the controller as, oh, the controller is what interface your endpoint. Your endpoint calls your controller. Your controller calls the service. Your service calls the model. That's how it is. I'm sure by now you're like, why not put everything in one place? It's because of testability, right? Okay, so we now have our, you're also familiar with this grouping of a thing with Gene. The first thing is that my first request, all my requests goes through API/v1, right? If you look at it, all the requests that's going to happen and future is going to sit inside this bucket. Now from there, I start plucking things off and start determining what is what and which is which. Okay, so for login, I pass it to authentication controller.login. We're going to look into that later. Then for logout, I also do the same. This is not done yet. While that one is done, this is not a protected what's it called? This is not a protected endpoint. It's public. Anybody can log in. Anybody can. Not everybody should be able to log out. Okay, well, I don't require anything to log out. No security privilege. So protected routes. These are everything here downward are protected. So first of all, this is authentication protector. It shouldn't be like this. It should be more of like, apart from it being authenticator protector, because I've not started showing inner pages like the dashboard, for example. I've not started saying the dashboard. The only part I'm protecting is the fact that you cannot check yourself. Anybody that wants to check themselves needs to be authenticated. So that's the authentication middleware, which we're going to look at soon. So once you go in, I want to be able to know me. The idea of this is to check me. Who is the person going in, right? Every time you request an endpoint, or anytime you call the server needs this information to keep checking every time to say, oh, is this person still valid? So this is like a way to keep checking the server. The endpoint has to be available so that when the front end is calling it, it knows whatever it receives becomes what it is. This is just a dummy call to get all users. Okay, so the rest is Swagger and we are good to go. Now let's start checking individually. The part that I'm very concerned about is the documentation bit. That's the Swagger documentation, because it's the Swagger documentation that makes code generation a breeze. So this is the Swagger documentation. One of the things that you will see that is very interesting is the fact that I specify what happens on the success when you're successful. And this model or this object is a text-based object, which does not have a way to verify. But there will always be a catch, because I think a couple of times I've forgotten to load it there. And the good thing is that when you try to generate that, it's going to give you an error that it can't find it. So that's also a good thing. So when you run Swagger initialize, it's going to say, hey, this is, not seen. It can be found entirely in the system. So it's still, doing some good work. Now you notice that I specified different failure points on my system. There's a failure point of 400, there's a failure point of 41, there's a failure point of 500. So this is server response to errors that has been generated in the system. Okay, so how will I know that I'm going to be having these errors? Now, if this error were never there before, as you are writing your code, let's say you've written your code finish, then at this point, I think I explained this to you sometime. At this point that you run this part of code and eventually there was an error, what kind of error do you want to send to the server? So based on the status that you specify here will determine the failure you are sending to the Swagger documentation. So for here, you are saying that it is bad, status bad request. You can see the number is 400. You will just say failure 400. You are returning an object. The object you are returning is a error response. Error response contains just two parts, the code and the error. That's just it, right? And then this is just a static, string that says invalid request. So the same thing applies to everything. Anytime you have an error, you run this guy here. You still send error and then everything gets to work. Okay, so let me explain another part that I think I need to talk about, which I have explained yesterday, but I will do a small explanation to it again. And that's talking to the model. Now this model, I keep saying that the model maps directly to the database. The model maps directly to the database. And once you get your data from the model, you need to return it. You can't return everything as it maps to the database. You have to refine the data and return the refined data back to the user. And that refined data is called DTO. That's like the scope, or that's like the wording, general word for it, DTO. And it's more refined because it requires, or it contains less data. It contains the specific thing required by the user, right? So this is me querying the database, which is cool. And at the end, when I query it, where does it go into? It goes into the model variable, because there's a variable I just created that is of type of the model, and pass everything. I hold it inside. Now that I hold it inside, remember that I cannot send that information to the client. So what can I send to the client? I already have it here, authenticate user. Inside it, I have employee DTO. I have the employee DTO here, and then I have this, helper. This helper is from this guy. This guy is the one that created the Golang, is the helper class. And what does the library does? It allows you to copy the model into the DTO. So any field that is not available there, it doesn't worry about it. Now once that is done, I do this other one. This one is to do password check. So, and that's why I was like, there, okay, so once I copy it, that's where I now have to do this one like this. Okay, so this password check to see that if the password match. If it matches, it does all these things, and it still keeps checking, because apart from the fact that your password checks out, it still needs to create JWT. I talked about what JWT is. It's a token to long story. So let's move on. Finally, after everything has checked out, we then need to set cookies. These cookies here is what we determine if the user is logged in or not. The cookie is set from the backend. The backend is the one responsible for setting cookies, and the cookies is sent to the front end. You said? Oh, okay. So the next part is that after everything, I now returned this guy, user authentication. By the way, all this while, guess what? I'm still at the back end all this while. But this information is supposed to be sent to who? To the front end. So let's do before we do anything, let's start the server. And how do you think we start the server? We start the server in a very weird way that is different from every convention that you know. I'm going to be using a make file. So this make file allows me to do several things. First of all, I want to use this one to generate the code. There's a code. This one is me that customized this one, by the way. It's not a known routine. So this is my own flow. So make gen generate codes based on my Swagger documentation. And it has just finished documenting the code, right? The next thing I want to do is to now do make. You have to put make first. Make dev. Make dev does two things. First of all, it does a, and then it does, you can see it's very funny. It does the air thing, and while it's doing air, once you finish running the air guy, it runs vite. And then both of them are running concurrently. If I make any request in vite, it gets to show. If I make any request in here, it gets to show. Now, the part I wanted to show you guys is the endpoints that I call, which is on the test. If I come here and then make this request, we have our successful call, and this is the data that gets returned. Beautiful. This is the data that gets returns. Now, this data is different from the model. This is the DTO already, processed. How does the front end knows all these columns? Because one of the things that I want you guys to be focused about is the fact that you don't want to be repeating yourself. You don't want to be copying the DTO that we've done. Imagine this DTO now. You don't want to be copying it and going to TypeScript and also replicating the same thing. You want this to be available to TypeScript. That has been done. That is what happened when you run our code generation, which I created, which is make gen. So if you read through what it does, it generates Swagger, and once it does that, it generates DTO for all the model used, and you can have access to it from your generated section of your code inside our front end. That's the web. Okay, so let's see where our code is sitting. And that all this stuff was created specially. So if you notice, there's a shared which I talked about, but I didn't, to say much about it. There's a shared here, and what the shared does is a place where related code will sit, because I'm going to be using the generated code from the web and also from the mobile code. So if I come here, I can see all the code generated. Everything here is generated. None of the code here was written by me. None of the code except for, okay, in fact, none. Totally none. All of them were generated by not AI, by the system, right? And this was used with Swagger. So that's why the Swagger is very important. So let's go through some of the codes that are interesting. So look at the services. If you look at the authentication services, you will see how it tries to connect. Most of the connection comes with OpenAI, which is here. So look at the IP. This part is very key. Remember I said something about the main.go, that part where you manually put the IP. That's how the system was able to highlight or hijack the IP and put it there. Okay, so that's that part. Remember, these codes are all generated. You are not supposed to touch it. Nothing, you're not supposed to do anything here. So this is to show you that it's going ahead to create all the requirements. The DTO employee, it has created it for you. Authentication user, employee, DTO employee. If you come here, all the columns you specify, all these were done in Go, but made available in TypeScript. So if you want to use any of these, you can actually go and use them. You can go. So all the columns has been created. DT company, everything was created. You just need to create it in Go and generate the code, and you are good to go. So now let's leave the generated code alone. Let's now see how to use them, how I made use of them. And like I said, I can make use of the generated code any way I wish. In fact, we'll be using them. So if you go to the API, and now apart from the fact that I say generated code, I can also reference to it inside any of my projects, like so, at edge/generated. I can reference to it like this. The same thing with the types. I've not come to these types. So the same thing as the API. I can reference to it by saying edge/API. So these are the APIs that I would have written myself. Okay. Let's see the login page. Let's now go practical. We're almost there. Now this is the login page to this application. Under, where is it? Under route, login, good. This is it here. Now I'm calling the DTO employee here. Do you see what's going on? This code was literally generated by Go for me, so that I can then make use of all the fields that I need directly in my database. I didn't create this one myself. So another part I also want you to see is the login code. The code for actually processing login is available. Where's the guy? Here, use authentication. That's use auth. This code was generated by, okay, this code was generated by me. However, the code to actually fetch or to make the posts to log in physically was generated by the API. So let me show you how I did it. This is it here. So I'm sure by now you know how use effect work, or rather hooks, how hooks works. Hooks is a bunch of functions that you can call that's related to that entity. So here is a hook and it's called use auth user. Okay, so for here now, I'll actually talk about provider. I'm not going to talk about provider now. There's context, there's provider, so I'm not going to talk about it for now. But what I want to show you is how I was able to log in. So this is how I authenticate user. Now, what is that function that allows you to log in? Is called post authentication login. How does the system knows this post authentication login? This is generated by Swagger or OpenAPI. Is what generated this. Now look at part of the generated code, which is available here, services. That's under shared, generated services. Notice that we have authentication services and then user services. The user services allows me to get users. The authentication services, guess what, allowed me to log in allow me to do quite some more. But let's see what it generates. All these are generated automatically. So we can see that it say, oh, post authentication login. So what do I need to be able to post? I need this payload. I need to be able to, I need this payload login request, and you can see it has email and password. Okay. And then if peradventure something happen, I will get this kind of error. Okay. Then the next one is logging out. There's a process to logging out. Then the next one is get authentication me. That's authenticate me. And all the requirements is actually there. What are the parameters that I need to pass if I need to pass any? This is what I return, what is coming back once I'm able to execute that successfully. So all those things are available, and you can just call it directly. Get. So let's focus on the one we wanted to call now, which is auth user, rather, which is API login request. We want to log in, or rather, this is the payload. So this is post authentication login. That's what we want to call, and it's available in where? In auth services. So if you come in here in our use effects, our use authenticator, which is here, so you can say authentication service dot post authentication. The payload is our email and password, which has been supplied, and after which, if everything checks out well, you are good to go. You are good to go. So that's all you need to do. The other things I'm doing here is I'm saving the user information, but not the token, right? I'm saving the user information. The server is doing other things for me. Now, enough of the interface. Let's get to see the UI. And yeah, so this is gone on for too long. Let's see how the code looks like, and then we can call it a day. So we have one now. You have to maintain the IP structure. I've changed the UI a little bit. I know I want to we are still using the glass effects, but I am trying as much as possible not to be too heavy on the glass. Try as much as possible, but the glass is still there, but just a little bit subtle. So like I said, we want to be able to control the images that shows. Some of the images are not too nice for what I want to depict. So I'm trying to find a way to control the images. Based on that, I've gotten an API that I won't bring that into this mix, but the API allows you to be able to get images based on your description. So you can actually search for some images. What works for app like this are actually landscapes, right? Apps uses landscape. Something like this is beautiful, not literally human being or objects. So it's better you use landscape. It's safer, it's better, and everybody is covered from anything. Okay, so let's go in. So I've been able to implement some interesting things, which we might not be able to go in details to explain, but let's go in. So if you go in, I was able to do some few things in the system. So by default, you have this look. If you stretch, it changes the view to a desktop view. I had to make it automatic. Normally in some of the admin session, you have to toggle on a menu to change it at will, but I just decided that it should be automatic. Right? I just decided it should be automatic, and that will be it. So you can't hide it. Good luck. You can't hide it for now though. But when it gets to mobile view, of course, it then goes away, and you should be able to toggle that by this. I think a place close to the hand is better, instead of way far up here or here. This does other things. So this happens this way. Now, I did something today which was interesting. Not this. This is not what I did today. I did something today which is, if you log out, it kind of gives you this vibe, right? I've been wanting to do this for like forever, like wanting to have this kind of login screen whereby you've logged out, but because it's your system, you are still there, right? Even though it doesn't have your login credentials, you have to supply the login credentials before you can go in. So if you try to refresh, it will still come in like so. But of course, you can clear that scenario if you don't want. You can say sign in as another user, and then it comes in fresh, and you've automatically lost that privilege to have that effect. But of course, you can always come in, and once you go out, it will still give you ability to reset. So this one took me some time to actually implement, and this was implemented here. I think we saw it briefly. This was implemented here when I tried to log in. If you notice, I just did it here. So immediately the user is able to log in. So I just create a catched user and stringify the user, because local storage does not store objects, it just stores strings. So I convert all the thing from the user coming from the backend. I keep it here. So once I go to the login page, if this value is existing, why not provide this? Else, just say that person is coming for the first time. Okay, so that's what I've been able to do so far. The next step for this project is that I want to be, I'm still far from doing anything here. I'm not going to be doing anything here for a while. Like when I mean anything here, I'm not going to be building the interface here for a while. There's going to be a lot of time spent on this page, not just this page. There's a lot going to be spent on this page. So this is where you do the onboarding parts. When I mean onboarding from other businesses. So there are two sections. There's a section whereby the user is coming for the first time, or a regular user. Of course, when you have an app like this, you want to log in. So there's that session where you want to log in. But there's this session which is for this person seeing this for the first time, sign up, set up office line for your organization. So there should be that part. So this part, the interface, well, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to look like this, but it's now going to look differently. I don't know if I should maintain this look or should have a different look. What I mean a different look, it's having the left hand side and the right hand side. So what happens in the left hand side is giving you insight on what the product is all about, while on the right hand side you then fill the form. So I've been wanting to make the login as simple or as minimal as possible, so that when you now intend to sign up, you will now have more things to look at, that will inspire you to continue. So that is the idea, even though we still have more things to do. Still have more things to work on. So this is the update. Let me load what has been done so far. Let me upload what has been done so far. I have 11 updates that the system has public. One of the things I did, this one took me like 1 hour. It took me 1 hour. It's very funny, but let me show you. It's very funny. I'm sure you might not be aware of it. Do you see this shape? This shape is not a regular shape. This guy's shape is not a regular shape. So I think, so I will stop there. I will not go further. That shape is not a regular shape. So that shape is very nice it's a very nice shape. Let me show you the name of the shape. So that's called, what was that safe? So that's the shape. It's not a regular shape. Blend of square and a circle, hence the name. Smooth transition, unlike a square. Yeah, so it's a nice shape, and most times people use it to hold data, or rather to hold picture. So you can see that it's not a uniform edges. It's not a uniform edge, and it makes the whole thing look nicer. So it took me some time to get that thing done. So that's what I'll be using for avatar for the app once I am maybe loading users or something like that. And that's what I also used for this one here. So it's not a regular, you don't even want to know how that got to be there. Okay, so like I said, I'll be staying off the interface for a long time. I want to actually focus on onboarding new people, onboarding parts, and yeah, we also need to do forget password and what have you. So that needs to be set. Token, so many things needs to happen here. So many things need to happen. The onboarding is a very long stuff that we've not been working on lately. So that's all for today. So I just end the YouTube session. So